morning, ladies and gentlemen, Madam Chair. I would like to share my recollection of the first steps of a newly formed ARC some 25, 26 years ago. Looking into studying the first annual report of the ARC 91-92, I came across this long cherished idea as minuted in the annual report. Since I do not know who wrote it, but it reads as follows: mindful of successful similar institutions elsewhere in the world, putting agricultural research on an independent basis with greater scope than is possible within the private sector. My first idea or the reasons which I could identify for forming the ARC then was firstly to separate research, development and technology transfer from extension and strategy functions from the then Department of Agriculture. Secondly, and very important at that time, was to acquire the ability to generate our own external income, which was not possible at that time. Thirdly, to quicken corporate decision making and ensure that we as researchers more quickly deliver on the R&D needs of our country. And most importantly, that we developed a closer working relationship with our stakeholder, our funders, and especially all the different value chains. The early days were driven and informed by the following. Firstly, and most importantly, the release of Nelson Mandela in 1990. The Agricultural Research Act, which came into effect the 1st of December 1990, the start of CODESA. And then, most importantly, those initial 2 years where a small group of personnel assisted a nucleus group of the Department of Agriculture, the then president, the first president of the ARC, Dr. Haynes, to implement a system of framework autonomy. The ARC's establishment, 1st April 92, the transfer of, I believe, 12 institutes totaling 4,750 employees to the newly established ARC. And most importantly, and it has been referred to earlier, the implementation of South Africa's first constitution. These were the drivers for the think tank to put together a new ARC. Also important was what happened on the agricultural scene. The first Minister of Agriculture, Mr. Hanekom, one of the first things he did was to close down all agricultural boards. And they had a very, very important role. They delivered a lot of services, they coordinated, but also most importantly, agriculture operates within a single channel marketing system. And that was also closed down. And as a result, all the commodities needed to compete on an international level, but most importantly also the new emerging sector. This created a lot of anxiety and uncertainty within the agricultural sector, and most importantly also within us as the new Agricultural Research Council. Notwithstanding that, we as young scientists were very positive, and we look forward to a new ARC where, as Org also said, we believe it will be better there, and we will have access to more funding, and we will be able to deliver on all our expectations. The response of organized agriculture was very, very important. Firstly, all the cooperatives organized themselves in private-owned businesses. Producer organizations organized themselves in newly formed commodity organizations. As mentioned there, the agricultural value chains requested government support to assist them to form a research trust, commodity research trust, and one of the first decisions they needed to do was to decide how they are going to be funded. How are they going to fund themselves to deliver on all their key performance strategies, etc. They had to decide, are they going the route of a strategy levy, or are they going to opt for a voluntary levy, as some of the groups did. My personal experience during this most important initial few years of the ARC was, unfortunately, a lack of much needed political buy-in into this newly formed ARC, and most importantly, a slowdown in parliamentary grant. This later on was not only a trend in South Africa, but it was also a trend throughout the world. These two early changes eventually resulted in significant financial difficulties and operational constraints, even in retrenchments within the ARC. We started off with PG grants of up to 70%, but they slowly went down to lower percentages. But how did we as ARC react under these difficult circumstances? And maybe I relate some of my own experiences as far as Small Grain Institute and Grain Crop Institute. We functioned in the decentralized manner as institute management, and we believed in the following three principles. The first one, as Darwin said, it's not only the strongest which survive best, but those who adapt the quickest to change. Secondly, we surrounded ourselves with positive, willing, and able people. But most importantly, we were task-driven. We believed in a collective, that we as a collective can grow the ARC and its 12 institutes to become a renowned international institution. At institute management level, we took up the responsibility to totally manage the institute, the recruitment of the best available people with specific focus at that time of young black scientists, professional. We engage in professional financial management with a strong drive to generate external income, the maintenance and the upkeep of our facilities. Most importantly, we did not wait for anyone to come and assist us to fund our most important non-negotiables, but we took up ownership to manage the institute on ourselves. Hurdles we as young scientists had to overcome. The most important hurdle for us as scientists at that time was the norm, not only within the ARC, but as scientists throughout South Africa, is we know best. We will decide the research needed by industries. We were trained as scientists, and we are not trained to chase funding, etc. That was a rude awakening for all of us. And how was that rude awakening? Later on, we learned that the ability, how we overcome these wrong perceptions, and how the need there is to liaise with industries, government, and other international funders, assisted us in how we changed and how successful we came. become. A second weakness for us was to define the R&D for the R&D needed to fast track the emerging agricultural sector into that of a sustainable commercial level. We also experienced much difficulty in persuading the decision makers, then the portfolio committee of Mr. Derek Hannekom, of the term which we used, scale neutral R&D. That we believed at that time that the R&D we do is applicable for the whole value chain, inclusive of the emerging sector as well as the commercial sector. But at institute level, we responded as follows. Fortunately, at that time, the Field Crops Institutes had a sound working relationship with the industries as early as 1980. As an example, the then wheat board, the maize board respectively invested millions in our buildings, infrastructure, glass shells and scientific equipment. This happened even prior to the existence of the ARC. But the importance, this close working relationship where we as scientists and they as industry, our stakeholders and funders served on each other's operational and decision-making committees for many a year resulted in an important understanding of each other's challenges and needs. Over many years, probably 25 years and more, this resulted in us delivering on their needs. We strengthened our working relationship with our stakeholder, our clients and our funders. We delivered on time with value, need-driven projects, reports, services, products, spectrum of services, numerous scientific and popular publications, manuals and books in an endeavor to assist these industries under the new marketing environment to become competitive on an international level. We furthermore, and most importantly, improved our level at Institute, that of financial management, strategic planning, as well as the upscaling of our facilities and R&D capacity. In the case of both SGI, Small Grain Institute and Grain Crops Institute, and I believe many other institutes, this was the game changer. This relationship resulted in a most timely growth in our external income, which buffered us against the harsh and devastating downward trend in PG allocations at that time. We were slowly able to increase and diversify our external income base to levels of beyond 60% of our total budget. This did not happen only within the Field Crops division, but I believe also in the horticulture group. With today's 2020 hindsight, this one development sustained and even grow our external revenue and our R&D outputs as well as capacity during a difficult period. To my knowledge, the only downside to this close relationship with our funders were that we as scientists, industry and benefit, there was a significant shift, downward shift in the kind of research we do. It shifted towards applied R&D, shorter-term projects focusing on quick solutions and moving away from much-needed basic R&D. Secondly, we experienced a difficulty in securing funding for public good R&D, and we still have that experience today. To acquire funding for things like annual pest and disease surveys, biological control of various pests and diseases, anticipated effects of climate change, conservation of our resources, and most importantly, funding to raise the yield barrier of self-pollinated crops. Again, this important development wasn't specifically that of the ARC, but it was experienced throughout the world. in conclusion, Mr. Chair, fortunately, the current ARC executive from 2006 and onwards, firstly, stabilized corporate governance after an uncertain period of quick succession in corporate management. Under the leadership of Dr. Mufuli, initiated significant improvements in all facets of corporate governance. Secondly, they improved the level of understanding by our current stakeholder and decision makers regarding the importance and the relevance of ARC as the agricultural service provider of research and development in South Africa. And most importantly, our pivotal role in assisting South Africa to become food secure. Chairperson, with all that said, after studying similar developments regarding the management, the funding, the specific structures of comparable R&D institutions in both the developing and the developed world over many years, I am still of the opinion that the Agricultural Research Council is still the most appropriate vehicle to deliver on South Africa's agricultural needs and in the process assist in ensuring South Africa to become food secure. And secondly, that the ARC remains the most suitable institution to accommodate agricultural scientists to deliver on these needs. My plea is that we as a collective with vested interest in agricultural research support the ARC in all their endeavors. I thank you.
I just want to request that we thank Dr. Leroux in a special way, trained as a plant pathologist and has been general manager responsible for field crops and is just retired. What do we do with these brains? Thank you very much for your dedication. What lessons do we take from that? 5 things I see. The South African research is embedded in the God-given constitution, and the release of the very Honorable Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela is a landmark event that led to new changes. Number 2, the economic structural adjustment program, which most African countries went through, unsettled the system. There was liberalization of markets. But the good thing that South Africa did was to be forward-looking and cultivate private sector engagement, homegrown private sector. They set up, they closed down the parastatals, but opened up opportunities for commodity associations that became the go-to partner for research. Third thing, they had a business model. And the business model at the Agricultural Research Council was co-owned. They retained those people who were forward-looking. And the question I had is, what did they do with those who were pulling them down? They wanted positive thinking people. Fourth thing, they did have hurdles. They had scientists who said, we are trained to do science and we are the best because we own knowledge. But our DDG will tell you knowledge comes from somewhere else. And these scientists said, it's not our core business to be looking for money. Find the money and give it to us. But thanks to the visionary leadership, they've been able to increase their own income from 30% of total cost to 60% that is generated from within. Thanks to the partnership they have, the win-win with industry that funds the research. But unfortunately, when you get into those relationships, you may be excluding the majority. So, FAO, GIFA, CGIAR, when we want to generate those public goods, what is the model for funding public good research? That's the question I pose. We're going to go to our third veteran. who is going to be sharing with us from concept to an internationally renowned rural and development institution. Dr. O. van Rensburg, this is your time.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my privilege to give you a bit of further background as to the days leading to the establishment of the Agricultural Research Council, but also then the early years. Now, Cobus has actually given a very comprehensive view on the days before the establishment and also those early days, how we operated. I'm not going to duplicate on those, I just need to emphasize a few other things. Let me start off by saying that the three horticulture institutes in the Agricultural Research Council collectively has about 300 years of experience. Now, we all used to be part of the Department of Agriculture. It was structured into regions such as the Highveld region, the winter rainfall region, etc., each with a research and an extension component. During the mid-70s, the process started to transfer all the researchers and technicians to a designated region based on commodities such as grains, fruits, animals, etc. In other words, there was this effort to bring a critical mass together so that we can improve in our achievement. So-called loose units were consolidated into institutes where necessary during the 1980s. An example is the Grain Crops Institute that consisted of the Summer Grain Center, the Small Grain Center, and the Oil and Protein Research Center. Those were amalgamated into the Grain Crops Institute. The Cabinet appointed 3 committees to oversee the planning of the establishment of the ARC. Those were policy, management, and implementation. Dr. Haynes was the first president and Professor Dani Hubert the first council chairperson. The head office used to be in the Celtis Plaza building, just around the corner from where the current central office is, and a core group of employees went to the Celtis Plaza to start working on the implementation plan. That was during February 1991. The council, the first council, was appointed on 1 April 1991. The ARC was established then a year later on 1 April 1992 with 4,750 employees. You can see the numbers there of how it was made up. Researchers 713 and technicians 1,120. You can also see the number of PhDs was 25%, 30% or 36% rather, at MSc degrees, 30% honors degrees, and 9% PhD degrees. The ARC was initially established with 10 research institutes and 2 research centers. Later, some other institutes were joined, such as the agricultural engineers. And I don't know whether it's known, but I personally was given the task to write the motivation to bring the engineers into the ARC. I think what was important that I need to emphasize is what Phyllis has referred to, and that's the strong partnership with industry. I think that was a very strong point, and it opened up opportunities for external incomes by the industry and also other partners. Take note that research and development projects were, and they are still, needs-driven, with emphasis on impact and sustainable farming practices. Just a few examples of what we've achieved thus far in terms of research and development projects. A high-value crops program was started in the Eastern Cape, and incidentally, this was by one of our female researchers, Rosemary de Breer. The project investment of 600,000 rand annually resulted in 2013, when this study was done, in a 20 million revenue for smallholder farmers. That's a 32-fold increase on return on investment. The importance is, when we started the program, those people had nothing, no income at all, and barely enough produced for their own consumption. Plant breeding is a very important aspect in terms of subtropical and deciduous fruits, and also vegetables and ornamentals. It's largely an export-driven crops that we are looking at. The focus is on competitiveness of farmers on global markets. We also focus on agro-processing and post-harvest qualities, with development of new rootstocks, which forms an important part of this program. We also use biotechnology in breeding programs to fast-track our breeding programs. The RC doesn't only look at major crops, but we also look after the smaller ones. An example here is the one with guavas, where a soil-borne gall disease appeared in the 1980s. It spread rapidly throughout the production areas and caused a loss of 90% of commercial plantings. The ARC screened over 30,000 seedlings in order to search for resistance. We identified 2 resistant lines which were developed as rootstocks, and as a result of that, of this intervention, the guava industry could re-establish. Water management is another very important one, especially since water is becoming very scarce commodity in South Africa. And what I want to mention here is that we have developed different strategies for different situations. Some of those have resulted in water savings of up to 40%. I want to conclude with the following. If we look back at the ARC staff was recruited mainly from National Department of Agriculture, of their research divisions. During the shaping years and the early years of the ARC, that was characterized by huge uncertainty. And if I had a look at what was written in documentations, then I can assure you that was perhaps the greatest challenge to overcome. And that was the uncertainty factor. The institutes run basically on an autonomous way, as Kobus also pointed out. The challenges and the concerns of way back then remain basically the same. But I think the quality of our achievements have improved with big strides. Very quickly, Kobus also mentioned this. I think lately the corporate governance issue is one of the highlights, where the ARC received clean audits for the past number of years. Apart from production research, we also now focus on post-harvest technology and agro-processing technologies, with an emphasis also on indigenous fruit trees. From those early years, the ARC road was just amazing, and I'm pretty sure so will be the future, without any doubt in my mind. Long live the ARC. Finally, I want to emphasize the importance of strong and lasting partnerships. And I believe that the ARC provides a gateway to Africa. And since no one should be left behind, we are ready to partner with our brothers and sisters in Africa to work and to achieve in terms of the African research agenda. This is the only pictures that I gave, but it illustrates what our researchers are made of. The research citrus orchard near Komatipoort, for those of you who don't know where that is, that's just outside the Kruger National Park, close to the Mozambique border. And I've noted there that researchers have a way to overcome huge challenges. Can you see why? If you can't see, I'll give you the next one. Yes, you've seen right, it's a lion. Fortunately, before they got out of the car, they noted those lines. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Dr. Van Grinsberg. He is an entomologist who is now investing in R&D. Thank you for your contributions. We are celebrating today a baby that was born in 1992, who is 24 years, and these veterans have taken us through the journey. In this presentation by Dr. Van Grinsberg, we've heard about the successes of R&D, but what really touched me where I was sitting when you shared the success from the Eastern Cape, we're able to get first-hand experience. So if you think a DDG who goes into rural development has not been with the people, we've got one. That 600,000 investment into high-value crops, which is now yielding 20 million, was championed none other by our DDG, Dr. Swart. I'm sure you are proud and smiling as you look back at the value of research for development and what it does for your own people. Thank you very much for planting the seeds. We've heard about the guava industry, but what really is biting our agriculture is water. We have a drought now, but water is becoming one of the scary, wicked problems that we need to address, particularly for the South African constituency. We are honored today to have the CEO of the Water Research Council, and there's a partnership, a strong partnership with the Agriculture Research Council, because no agriculture without water. So the two are key partners, and thank you for accompanying this journey as the Water Research Council. Now, what do we take from those veterans? I take three things. There are big challenges, but it's the fittest who survive, but more than that is those who adapt to change that survive. Be forward-looking and move on with the change. Embrace the private sector and have a win-win partnership as the research community. Corporate governance is key because that will bring respect, and thank you for those clean audits that you have sustained through excellent leadership. And finally, partnerships. Strong, everlasting partnerships. It begs the question, where do you find those strong partnerships? How do you cultivate a partnership? How do you make sure it's a win-win partnership? How do you make sure you are transparent with each other and you learn together and you don't come in as the superpower solution giver and an underdog with no money? Let's bridge the gap and make sure we bring dignity to our partnerships. It gives me pleasure now to call the man who is going to take us to the birthday celebration of this 24-year-old institution. Where are we now and where are we going? Are we going to sustain these successes? Thank you very much, Dr. Shadrack Mapule. This is your time.
Ladies and gentlemen, while the experts are busy putting things on the screen, please join me in thanking the staff of the ARC that have been here for 20, 30 years and so on and more, for the contributions that they've made towards the success of the ARC. Because if it was not for them, we would not be where we are. And let's say thank you. Personally, I would like to say thank you to the three gentlemen that have just spoken, because you know, when you get assigned a task like this to be the CEO, sometimes you come with a team, but I was sent out alone, and I walked in and I was like, whoa, looks like I've been thrown into the jungle, and I really had to find my feet very quickly. Otherwise, I knew that the people that had asked me to be the CEO of the ARC were very quickly going to say, but do you really know what you're supposed to do? So, my first day actually started in Parliament. It didn't start in the ARC, where I was then asked, what are you now going to do with the ARC? And I was wondering, but actually I haven't been into the office yet. So I had to sort of answer a few questions around some of my thoughts and so on. But I think that actually gave me the space to actually have a sense as to when I get to the office, what am I going to do? But when I got to the office, there were 3 reports, each one about this thing. And they were forensic audit reports. And I looked at them, read them, and I said, seems like actually I've been thrown into something that's got more problems than I was told. Should I go back and resign or what? Because it looks like I'm not qualified to be doing this job. Anyway, after a few days and having gone through a lot of the work, we started to realize that actually it was probably a lucky thing, because I didn't have to do the investigations. All I had to do was implement the recommendations of what was then the board of the ARC's work from establishing those forensic audits. And then all I had to do was simply implement the recommendations of those reports. And I think that helped us in establishing a sense of rapport with the colleagues in the ARC around how we were going to work together. And we began to start to understand really the challenges that the organization was facing. Of course, like any research, especially public research institution, first amongst that was the funding. You've heard it from our colleagues. It still is. And I don't think it will disappear. The other one was around whether we had the right kind of infrastructure in terms of land, buildings, and equipment. And the third one was whether we had the right kind of expertise, the people, in terms of the science, in terms of the skills, and in terms of whether we had them in the right numbers. You heard when the ARC was established, it had about almost 5,000 employees. But what you haven't heard was that it was actually primarily at the time it was established, focused on about 150,000 farmers. Move that to 2006, there is a land reform program. There are government programs that are requiring the ARC to focus on a broader range of issues and initiatives. South Africa's trade barriers have been removed. The trade in South Africa had almost doubled. The requirements and expectations out of the ARC much bigger. What that meant was that you actually needed far more than the 4,500 that were listed as part and parcel of the people working for the ARC. Well, of course, we are in a country that doesn't have a critical mass of scientists or people with high skills. And so what are you going to do? You then need to begin to work smart. So in the last 10 years, it's been a journey where we had to re-engineer ourselves in a manner that actually looks strategically at picking only those areas where you can deliver the things and have the kind of impact that you need to have. We re-engineer ourselves in terms of the organizational structure. Of course, some of those that were not the right people in the organization, we had to ask them to get career advice elsewhere. But also we began to look for others that could also become part of the family and the team. And to our surprise, there's always been a lot of people wanting to and willing to join the ARC, both from within South Africa and from outside South Africa. And it was a pleasure, and we really have to say thank you to the colleagues that have been in the ARC for the last 30 years, for them especially to welcome people to work amongst themselves who were not South African, and to welcome them to work as part and parcel of themselves and not treat them any differently, and as colleagues, and to become friends with them. The other was around how do we grow our expertise. And that's when we then began to think around how do we accelerate the growth in terms of our professional development program. So it wasn't just around recruiting young scientists, it was also around creating a program that looks at, if you're recruiting these young scientists, what else are you going to offer them for them to be able to grow as scientists? And what support systems and mentoring systems are you going to put around them for them to be able to be the people of the scientists that are going to deliver the success that is required today. 10 years ago, the ARC had in the order of about, somewhere in the order of about 100 peer-reviewed scientific publications. I remember challenging my colleagues. I think Dr. Scholes was there, and I think Dr. Leroux and Dr. Van Rensbeck and our host here, I don't know where she is, she perhaps needs to stand up. Please stand up. The manager and our host here, Dr. Fenter, she was also in the room among them. We then challenged each other that colleagues says, we're only producing about 100 peer-reviewed publications. Can we think through a target that is real? Challenging but real. We counted the number of people that had PhD degrees in the ARC. We then said, can we then set ourselves a target that says, in a year or two, we shall be producing at least one publication per PhD in the ARC. That was 5, 6, 7 years ago. We're now looking at about 500 peer-reviewed publications in the ARC. And the number of PhD scientists in the ARC is around 250. So we've actually doubled the number of scientists, but also doubled the actual output. And congratulations and thank you to the colleagues. We would not have done it if it were not for you actually taking the mantle amongst yourselves. You heard from Dr. Leroux and the colleagues around the need for us to work very closely with the private sector. Throughout the whole process, we have worked very, very closely with the private sector in a variety of ways. The various boards of the ARC that have come and gone have always challenged us to transform, but also they've also always challenged us to say you must still continue to work with the private sector to deliver on what they need. We haven't lost them. Once in a while they tell me, no, we're not going to work with the ARC this time and so on, but actually that's because at that particular point in time we're not ready to implement a particular project. The Maize Trust comes out of the Maize Board. They continue to be one of our primary funders. The horticulture industry has been there for us, and they continue to be there, and we will continue to work with them. The potato industry, the citrus industry, you name them, all the various commodity organizations continue to fund the initiatives and the work of the ARC. We are a public institution, not for profit, and as you heard, depending on taxpayers' money has been a challenge at a time when the nation was focusing on issues of development, and therefore investment in research is something that goes in the back burner. Because I remember having put together a business plan with my colleagues, and we go to the National Treasury to say, this is our plan, can you give us more money? And I was given an option to choose. And the narrative of the option was very simple. There is no electricity in the country, we have to give ESCOM 60 billion. That leaves X amount, and we have to give the Minister of Health 5 million rands for vaccination of children in hospitals. And that leaves 10 million to fix some water, sewage pipes and so on. So what are you going to do? In terms of the impact that you're going to have with the other 10 million that's still left in the kitty? And you must tell us the numbers in terms of those that are going to vote. So I'm sitting at National Treasury, I'm hearing this from senior officials in National Treasury, not just your normal officials. These are economists, these are people who understand long-term planning and so on. And they were giving me the option at the time when I'm asking for an injection. At the time I was actually asking for an injection of double the amount of money. At that time I was actually looking for about 200-300 million rands. And I was asked to make a choice between whether I should let them not give me the 10 million rands. So I walked out with zero. But that was a lesson for the CFO and the rest of my team that we need to go back to the drawing board. And the drawing board was really around how are we going to leverage other resources, not just funds, in order for us to demonstrate the impact that the ARC has or needs to have on society and to deliver on what it needs to do. But then the CFO and I gave ourselves another task, which was to then, how are we going to actually bring actual evidence that's going to demonstrate both to the policymakers and to National Treasury that actually if you double the investments in the Agricultural Research Council, you're going to have a much more bigger impact on the economy than you're actually counting in terms of votes. So we then agreed to work with the National Treasury on commissioning a study that actually was looking at the impacts of investments in agricultural research over the last 30 years, and also looking at what the requirements and what the impact should be and would be and what it has been We compiled that study, and fortunately the board approved that we should take that particular study and give it to the minister and also go and sell it to National Treasury. We were successful in doing that. And when we presented to National Treasury, they humbly accepted our study and simply said, well, at the moment we don't have the funds, but can we give you a 36% increase next year and a 20% increase in the following year, and then in the outer years we can talk. That's what changed the story of the ARC in the last 10 years. We then also began to start to say, what then strategically are we going to do in terms of the kind of skills that we need to have, in terms of mobilizing other resources. And we started to look into partnerships, because we can't be recruiting every scientist. There are 36 universities in South Africa, and we're all competing for the same resources. We then began to say, how do we explore partnerships with universities? And one of those was around joint appointments. And the reason we got into the aspect of joint appointments was a little bit selfish for the ARC, but it was also to achieve other things. One of those was for us to be able to influence our ability to recruit young scientists into the ARC. And secondly, it was also for us to be able to demonstrate to those that we work with elsewhere that we are more than just one, that we could mobilize other resources to deliver on the same project. And thirdly was to reduce the costs of delivering on projects, because we were realizing that we were competing with universities, and when they were presenting a proposal, the salary component that the university was presenting in the business plan was actually a stipend for a student, which actually made our projects very expensive. However, when we started partnering with them, we then began to achieve two things. One, students that we could train at a very low cost, but two, delivering on the project at very affordable costs to the farmers of South Africa. Then came another set of board members that challenged us even further. And that is the current board that said you need to transform and pay a lot more attention to the growing and the focus of government on land reform. Hence, we began to set up a whole new program that focuses on land reform. And we began to engage with the Department of Rural Development and Land Reform much more formally around how do we deliver on your needs. And we believe that we're on the right track. And the reason we believe we're on the right track is because at the time we started this, we'd already had a number of initiatives. And one of those initiatives was actually started by Dr. Moshe Swartz when he was a community worker, not even in the government at the time. He worked in the communities, in the villages, and he challenged us as the ARC to come and assist him around how to assist some of those villagers on production of fruits and vegetables. And that particular project is what has just now been demonstrated. So fortunately, the Department of Rural Development and Land Reform came on stream and agreed to partner with us and deliver some of the resources in order for us to be able to do the work. So we've done a lot of the work around the training for them. We trained more than 30,000. And I remember it was a small graduation ceremony in a tent or marquee that's similar to the one outside that you've seen. It was actually put up right here. And the minister said, we can't come into these temporary structures all the time. Can you at least look for, I said, I don't have the money. And Dr. Sonia Fender and the others said, Minister, we can put together a business plan for you to fund it. And the minister said, I'll fund it, start. That was 2.5 years ago. So today we are opening this new training facility, which actually is going to be a multi-purpose training facility to train scientists, technicians, farmers, extension officers on a regular basis, not just once. And it is not only going to be used by the ARC, but it is also going to be used by a whole range of other government departments and a whole range of other institutions, including international institutions. Throughout this whole process, ladies and gentlemen, we've also been working with our international partners. Some of them are amongst you. You've heard about the International Potato Center, Orange Flash Sweet Potato. We work with IITA, we continue to work with CIVIT, and a whole range of other partners, including other research institutions on the African continent. We've also worked, by the way, with the FAO quite closely on a number of initiatives, both within South Africa and outside South Africa. And we believe that it is through these kinds of partnerships that we will continue to contribute to the success of the farmers, to the success of agriculture, in ensuring that food security is achieved and attained. One of the key things that my colleagues, whenever we put together our strategic plans, whenever we start to say these are our strategic objectives, they very often challenge me to say, well, if those are your priorities and outcomes, what is that going to mean to the farmer? And the reason we brought what we call in the veterans, the people that have been here, to at least talk to you, is because the lessons we learned from them was that as long as you're talking about it as a theory, it's no use. So they then started to then say, you need to translate your business plan and strategy into exactly what is it going to mean to the farmer. So we've gone from having, for example, in terms of maize production in South Africa, on 4 tons per hectare, dryland farming, rain-fed. We're now on an average of about 6 to 10 tons per hectare. All of those are production and productivity gains arising from investments in agricultural research. Recently, we've now, you're probably going to hear from 1 or 2 of our colleagues around some of the successes around the development of some of the vaccines that actually are arising from the work of the Agricultural Research Council. I'm not going to spend a lot of time because you will hear a lot of these achievements of the ARC. I thought it important that at least you see some of the innovations that are arising from the ARC. What you see there is actually a shipping container that's been converted into a biosafety level 3 laboratory. That's going to now enable us to do some of the work around the phenomics and genomics and so on. And it's actually, for some of those that are going to under secure port, you'll be able to see that. I talked to you about the number of students that we have in the organization. At the time, 10 years ago, we had only about 50 or 60. We now have about 350 postgraduate students doing their masters and PhDs on projects within the ERC. And what's good about that is that they're working on projects at the same time that they're also learning how to work with communities. So making science relevant to the communities and to responding to the needs of the society becomes very important to the sustainable future of the ARC, but for the sustainable success of agriculture. And the same arises with the fact that we've also been looking into how do we grow our livestock industry, and that also means making sure that we're able to deliver the solutions for the success of the agriculture sector. And one of our successes that you might be hearing from some of our colleagues is the development of the vaccine. We've also worked around trying to make sure we find a way of accessing or going out to reach those particular farmers in far-flung areas. One of those is a truck that you'll see that's parked outside, a special purpose designed truck vehicle that actually is used to deliver the scientific solutions out there. It's designed to be able to do that. It's got microscopes inside, and this is some of the work that we're doing around embryo transfer, artificial insemination out there in the rural areas, not necessarily in our laboratories, and using that particular truck to deliver those particular services. You've heard about the special purpose project that we're talking about, which is counterpart to early COVID. Colleagues, we're working not only just with partners inside the ARC or inside South Africa, but we're working with partners throughout the world. And we believe it is these partnerships that actually are sustaining us in terms of mobilizing resources, but also in terms of learnings and experiences, sharing information, and also in terms of making sure that we deliver amongst our communities. The reason we put together a proposal for us to, I'm not going to go into the rest of my presentation, but you will be able to get it as part of the report, is because in the ARC, one of the things that we've now learned is that the future actually lies not only in the work that we can do ourselves, but the future lies in our ability to deliver on our scientific solutions, but also the future lies in our ability to engage with a whole range of our stakeholders, learning how to make sure that we can scale up our technologies to meet the needs of all the different stakeholders. But also the future lies in our ability to work in partnerships, both internally in South Africa, but to grow our partnerships also outside South Africa. And we hope that by coming to the Agriculture Research Council and taking a look at some of the work that we're doing, having a sense of some of the infrastructure that we've got, some of the technologies that we've got, that you begin to identify some of those that you'd like to partner with, and we'd be happy to partner with you and work on a number of projects, not only just in South Africa, but also outside South Africa. I thank you.
Thank you very much to Dr. Shadrack Makuli, who has just helped to unpack that the fundamentals have to be in place. You cannot be a leader of a national research institution and council without making sure the infrastructure is right, that you've got the qualified people in place, and that you give them targets for publication. One PhD holder, one publication a year. But they've been able to beat that target. It's close to 2 publications on average per PhD holder. Congratulations to all the staff. Who's going to be speaking to us about building resilient resources for maize production in changing climatic conditions and African soils? Dr. Mashingai.
Thanks, Chair. We are between you and lunch, so I'll be very quick. I'm going to share some information on some work ARC is doing on maize breeding. I will save you the trouble of going through the ARC mission and vision. Essentially, I'm from the Grain Crops Institute, which is one of the 11 institutes of the ARC, based in Potchefstroom. Our mandate is to conduct research, technology development, and technology transfer in order to improve competitiveness of the agricultural sector, increase productivity, ensure environmental and economic sustainability, ensure the production of safe and healthy food, and ensure sustainable and functional cropping systems. In doing that, in Grain Crops Institute, we are mandated to work on maize, sorghum, both for grain and also for sweet stem for bioethanol production, also pearl millet, sunflower, soybean, groundnut, cowpea, and bambara groundnut. Since last year, headlines like this have been quite common. For example, drought, East Southern Africa at risk of food shortages, eyewitness news. The South African grain silos drying up because of El Nino and things like that. Essentially, also, the predictions are that with climate change, beyond the El Nino, things will be even worse in terms of Southern Africa getting shorter seasons with more variable rainfall and much higher temperatures. Pictures like this are quite common in terms of smallholder farmers in South Africa, as well as the rest of Africa, particularly the fact that they cannot supplement with irrigation. For example, that was Those are photos from 2006 in Limpopo, 2011 in Limpopo, 2012 in Mpumalanga. And when we interviewed some of the farmers, essentially for them, maize makes the difference between children going to school or not in terms of family incomes and so on. But it's not only smallholder farmers in South Africa that experience drought. The same could be said for most of the countries in sub-Saharan Africa. And therefore, frequent droughts pose a continuous challenge to food security in Africa. Stem borers also are a permanent challenge in maize production, resulting in stranded maize plants, dead earths, and therefore loss of maize plants, and essentially reduced grain yields. That's just an example of the impact that stock borer could have on a maize crop. That is a smallholder farmer who was growing a maize seed crop of ZM 1523, which is an OPV, in Limpopo in 2014. When the SANSO inspector went to inspect the field, they said to the farmer, look, I don't think the IRC gave you the correct seed for you to produce the seed crop. You should call IRC and find out what happened, because this seems to be a wrong variety. When I went to check, essentially we gave them the correct variety, but when I opened one plant stock, there was stock borer damage. Opened another stock borer, another stock borer. To my assessment, almost 90% of the crop was affected by stock borer. To the extent that the crops that you then see, they also have stock borer damage, and therefore the associated fungal infections associated with that, and God knows how much mycotoxins that contaminated crop also produced. Then the question becomes, so what is the IRC doing about it? As the IRC, we are in a public-private partnership that we call the Water Efficient Maize for Africa, or WEMA, essentially to develop and deploy drought-tolerant and insect-protected maize hybrids that give at least a 25% yield advantage under moderate drought conditions. And in so doing, we also take into account the essential needs of farmers and consumers in terms of other traits as well. And we market the varieties under the brand name Drought Tego, where Tego is Latin for shield. That's the partnership. Essentially, the project is in 5 countries: Kenya, Mozambique, South Africa, Uganda, and Tanzania, with the national programs contributing germplasm, breeding, testing, and so on. Another major partner being the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center, CIMIT, also contributing germplasm, breeding, and testing and training of the NARS. The African Agricultural Technology Foundation, AATF, is managing the project, and the private partner is Monsanto, that donated transgenes for drought tolerance, as well as insect protection and BT gene. So how are the varieties being developed? Essentially, we're using a combination of both conventional breeding and transgenic or GM technologies. And in terms of conventional breeding, making use of advanced breeding tools like double diploid techniques, and using germplasm. For example, in South Africa, we're using germplasm from both the IRC, CIMIT, and also from Monsanto. Then in so doing, therefore, developing drought-tolerant lines that we then use to develop drought-tolerant hybrids. And with the GM traits donated by Monsanto for the drought gene to then enhance the drought tolerance of the conventional hybrids, and also to use the BT gene to protect the yield from stock borer. Essentially, how do we do this in terms of testing for drought tolerance? For example, we have a site in Rootsville, which is in Western Cape, that we use for what we call managed drought trials. We target stressing the maize plant at the most critical stage, which is flowering, like 2 weeks before flowering and 2 weeks after flowering. So there's a 4-week period of extreme moisture stress with a target stress of 50 to 60% yield reduction. But we also grow the maize under good irrigation conditions, so that in the end, we evaluate and identify varieties that will do well under both well-watered conditions as well as under moisture stress conditions, because we don't want farmers to then be disadvantaged by having good drought-tolerant hybrids that do well in a drought but do badly in a good season. We also use the off-station site in Makatini, which is quite warm in winter, and to do exactly the same in terms of managed drought stress around the flowering period. At places like Potchefstroom, where we are located, it's almost impossible to grow a good crop of maize without supplementing with irrigation. So every time we get a drought, I'm more or less the only person who is excited, because then I have opportunity to evaluate for drought tolerance. We also use the Dara, which is a highly rainfall site, to evaluate for yield potential under good conditions. But we don't only evaluate on station, we also take our materials to on-farm trials. For example, on the board you have trials that we planted in Limpopo, KwaZulu-Natal, and Mpumalanga. When we are satisfied with performance both on station and on farm, we then release and register varieties. So at the moment, as the Agricultural Research Council, we have released and registered 10 drought-tolerant maize hybrids, but as a WEMA project in the 5 countries, we have released to date 64 drought-tolerant hybrids. And the seed is then produced and marketed by local seed companies in the target WEMA countries. The picture at the bottom shows the ARC CEO and the Deputy Minister of Agriculture at the official launch of our first WEMA hybrids in December 2014. We have given out some of the drought-tolerant seed to farmers, and in terms of feedback, the varieties were well received by farmers. And for example, we have a farmer in Moifontein who said they received only about 250 millimeters of rainfall, and with the WEMA hybrids, they were getting about 2 tons per hectare versus 1.5 tons per hectare with other commercial hybrids that the farmer grew that season. And in Mokopan in Limpopo, the farmers reported that they got 1.14 tons per hectare compared to previously 0.6 tons per hectare. So for example, in 2006, we had a serious drought, and we as researchers on the top left, we actually harvested nothing, and the farmers bottom left also harvested nothing. But with WEMA products, you can see the difference in terms of what the farmers are now getting. And the picture that I said now with WEMA, essentially those are examples of exactly what farmers got in exactly the same field where we got nothing in 2006. So we should be doing something, we must be doing something right. But when you look at the smallholder farmers, poor soil fertility is also another major issue. And we also have a project that we call Improved Maize for African Soils, which is also a public-private partnership to develop and deploy low nitrogen tolerant maize hybrids. We are not discouraging farmers from using fertilizer. We are simply saying we want to give farmers varieties that will efficiently take up the nitrogen or efficiently utilize the nitrogen that the farmer applies. The IMAS partnership again includes the Agricultural Research Council in South Africa, the Kenyan Agriculture and Livestock Organization in Kenya, also CIMIT, and in this case, DuPont Pioneer is the private partner. In terms of evaluating for low nitrogen tolerance, essentially what we do is to initially deplete the soil of nitrogen to try and simulate the smallholder farmers' conditions to a situation where you expect a 2.5 to 3 ton per hectare crop without drought, but only moisture, but only poor soil fertility with respect to nitrogen. That's just an example of trials conducted under low nitrogen and also under high nitrogen. So essentially, as the project, we developed 8 low nitrogen tolerant hybrids and released and registered them in 2015. What remains now is for seed companies to again multiply the seed and make it available to farmers. And the hybrids released and registered in South Africa were developed by both the ARC and also CIMIT. The IMAS project is now combined with a project that was called the Drought Tolerant Maize for Africa DTMA project to come up with a project that we are calling the Stress Tolerant Maize for Africa STMA, which we launched on the 22nd of March this year. Essentially to develop and deploy improved multiple stress tolerant maize varieties that effectively address emerging and future production challenges while increasing genetic gains and scaling up and scaling out products that are developed, as well as the knowledge that is gained through such research activities. The STMA partnership is made up of CIMIT and IITA, 4 countries in East Africa, Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda, 4 countries in West Africa, Benin, Ghana, Mali, and Nigeria, and 4 countries in Southern Africa, Malawi, South Africa, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. Again funded by the Gates Foundation and USAID, but most often we only mention the partners that write the check. We actually forget the fact that as partners, we actually also contribute a lot in terms of financially as well as otherwise. We have 4 primary outcomes in the STMA project, essentially to have innovative breeding tools and techniques applied for increasing the rate of genetic gains in the maize breeding pipeline, increase commercialization of improved multiple stress tolerant maize varieties with gender preferred traits by the sub-Saharan seed sector, increase seed availability and farm uptake of stress tolerant maize varieties in target countries, investment impact optimized through effective project oversight, monitoring and evaluation, and also communication of the results thereof. The stresses that we are addressing under the STMA project, essentially low nitrogen, drought, heat, striga or witchweed, mostly the striga asiatica in Southern Africa, the purple witchweed or striga montica in East and West Africa, grey leaf spot and northern corn leaf blight, maize streak virus, as well as maize lethal necrosis disease. Maize lethal necrosis disease is essentially a new disease that's ravaging East Africa, and we hope that it does not come to Southern Africa. My colleague, Dr. Prasanna, will actually be making a presentation on maize lethal necrosis disease, so I will not talk much about that. Apart from saying that if we work together as partners, no problem is too big or no challenge is too big, like those gents are showing them. And if we work together as partners and we can make a farmer who looks desperate to be one on the right who is happy with the maize, or if we change from a maize crop that's completely almost useless with respect to kernel or grain damage to a beautiful crop on the right. If we can do that, and if I can do that, then I'll definitely retire and go and ride elephants. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Dr. Mashingaidze. We won't allow you to retire until you've solved all our problems. I would like to move on to Professor Norman Maiumashe, who is going to be speaking to us on cutting-edge tools for a sustainable animal production sector, focusing on livestock genomics. Sir.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I know the timing is quite bad. I am standing between you and your lunch, and therefore I'm going to be very brief. The CEO this morning spoke about the professional development program that the ARC is very proud of, but he left the task to me to give you the evidence. I am the evidence that the professional development program works. I did all my postgraduate work through the PDP, and therefore I am a serious believer in human capacity development. But of course, I was not requested to come and talk about PDP here. I'm going to talk about the science, the cutting-edge tools that the ARC has heavily invested in the last few years, and their application to addressing real-world problems in the area of livestock. Let me start off by putting the problem into perspective. Often, if you are not able to diagnose the problem, chances that you're going to solve the problem are out of the window. So we have to be very clear about what the problem is. The problem that we are facing relates to the sustainability in the manner in which we are producing animal protein. And this sustainability is threatened by the negative impact that the production system is having on the environment. And secondly, because of the use of livestock that may not be adapted, we need to assist them in order to survive and produce by using chemical in order to address the challenges of not being able to tolerate external parasites. And also, in our effort to address the short-term challenges of food shortage, we use the animal genetic resources in the manner that is not sustainable. We do adopt indiscriminate crossbreeding, which is not good for long-term sustainability. And also the state of the natural resources, as Prof. Scholz has indicated this morning, that our livestock is very reliant on natural resources. We are not using them in a manner that is sustainable. So we have heard of the scary numbers about the population explosion, that very soon we're going to be 9 billion, and therefore the challenge will just become bigger. So I needed to make sure that we are all on the same page in terms of the challenge that faces us. Because of this population explosion, we are not going to be able to feed the world. So we have to look at alternatives. Otherwise, talking about food security will just be another talk. And there won't be appropriate actions to try and deal with this serious challenge. Now that I have given you a good glimpse on what the problem is, this slide suggests to you that we have a solution sitting right under our nose. Africa is blessed with farm animal genetic resources. We have diversity. In South Africa, for example, you can see we have beautiful cattle, Nguni cattle that have been around for ages. We have Drakensberger, we have Bonsmara, which is a composite, and we also have Africana, and a whole lot of other cattle breeds. So the solution is right here. It's just a matter of how are we going to harness these resources. We know what the problem is, and the solution is also very simple. To get a solution, you just take an inverse of the problem. So what we need is sustainability. And what does that sustainability represent? These are animal genetic resources that can have minimal impacts, negative impact on the environment. They should be adapted and also be very efficient. So there is our solution. Now the challenge that we sit with is that we need to identify an action that we will embark on in order to address the problem, because we know what the solution is supposed to be. We have been able to make significant strides in terms of using conventional breeding. But conventional breeding alone will not work. A bicycle will not get us there. We need to fly there because the challenge is quite serious. So we need appropriate and effective technologies that would address the challenge at hand. And therefore, technology is key here. The paradigm has changed. If we are going to breed animals that are going to produce food and address the challenge of food security, we can't be selecting for animals. We need to be selecting for those genes that underlie animal performance. So we're moving away from conventional breeding where we're just looking at the animal performance and now look at the causal factors, which are the genes. So the paradigm has changed, and in order for us to read the genes, we need the tools. And these tools have been developed in the last 10 years. And the ARC, as the ARC, having acknowledged that the problem is here and there is expectation from society in terms of ARC bringing a solution, we have been investing in the ARC biotechnology platform, which is a national platform. And this investment has started in 2010. And we are going into this in a big way. That is the platform, the building on the picture is the platform that you'll be visiting later this afternoon. And the beauty about this is that that is an old animal clinic. So what this says is that you need to think innovatively, as the CEO has presented this morning. So there's a lot of resources that went into building this platform. And the reason why we are able to motivate in putting these resources into building the platform is that we are investing in people. This is not an investment into machines, it's an investment in people. I'm going to go through a few slides of the cutting edge equipment that we have been able to put into the biotechnology platform. This is a very nice equipment, and what it does, it reads the DNA and tells you what sequence is there in that DNA. It gives you an ID of an individual animal that you can be able to separate from another animal. And these explain, by and large, the differences that you see in performance. So this is one of the machines that is there in the biotechnology platform for sequencing and high throughput genotyping. Here is another equipment called the HiSeq 2500, and it's also a DNA sequencer and one of its kind in the continent. In order to make sure that we get the good data that we're looking for, an investment needs to go into preparing the DNA and making sure that the samples are prepared in the manner that those machines that are presented can handle those samples and provide the data that we're looking for. This is big data that is being generated out of the system. And alongside, we are investing into computers that are able to do high-end computing within a very short space of time. So a lot of investment has also gone into this. And just because of this investment in human capacity and infrastructure, we have been able to engage with the industry in terms of making the livestock genomics technology applicable to South Africa. So we have engaged in the industry and all the role players in the last 4 years to put together a South African livestock genomics consortium. And through this consortium, we were able to put together a research funding, a research proposal that was submitted for funding. And funding has been made available by a public entity called Technology Innovation Agency. And also the industry has put money into this project. And this project is a consortium of the ARC, 4 local universities, and 13 cattle breeds. And the reason why we have organized ourselves in this manner is because we acknowledge that this is R&D and technology transfer. So if those people that you're going to transfer the technology to are not involved in the process, you are more likely not to succeed. To date, we have been able to genotype 3,500 animals, sequence 65 genomes, and 140 animals have been tested for post-weaning growth and feed intake. Here we are generating the data that can be used by our scientists to develop and adapt the technology. Summary. You might be thinking that I've reached the end. In summary, I think it's very clear that the challenge that we face is so big that conventional breeding will not allow us to address the problem. So we need to look at the latest genomic technology in order to address the challenge of food security. A prerequisite for us to be able to adopt these new technologies, we need an investment in people and infrastructure. And through this investment that was done by the ARC in the last 4 years, we have been able to get meaningful collaboration. And if it weren't for this investment, those collaborations will not be there. So the message here is that when we put money into R&D, we are not wasting money. I think we should be able to compete with ESCOM. And of course, I am a quantitative animal breeder by training, and I have people that I must acknowledge. I think Jasper, Dr. Jasper Rees, Dr. Farah Mchade, they are the brains behind the biotechnology platform. And Dr. John Baker from the ACGT, who's involved in the South African Livestock Genomics Consortium, is acknowledged. The ARC staff and postgraduate students. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Maiwashe, for being careful of the time. So we see your quantitative skills in play. Ladies and gentlemen, we did not allocate any time for Q&A. The 2 speakers are going to be with us throughout the day, and they want to share, but they are working with partners. They've highlighted their partners, so feel free to unpack what you've heard this morning.